Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched And Then There Were None from 1945. Now, some of you are probably better informed than I was. I did not realize this was, in fact, well, I realized going into it, but I did not realize prior. This is, in fact, an Agatha Christie adaptation. It is not a Poirot. It's not a Poirot book, but it is a mystery novel originally written by Agatha Christie, and it is the best-selling mystery novel of all time, if Wikipedia is to be believed. I was not really familiar with it. I also didn't recognize the name, and I'm not sure if that's good. If that's for a particular reason or not, or if I haven't read it before, but the book is actually known by several other names. It was published in 1939, and Agatha Christie is British. It was published in the U.S. in 1940 under the name And Then There Were None. However, it is also this story, as popular as it is known by several other names. One being 10 Little Indians, which is a nursery rhyme that is extremely antiquated for a whole variety of reasons that I don't think we need to dig into. But even before being called 10 Little Indians, the original title by Agatha Christie is 10 Little Word I'm not going to say on YouTube or at all. Because this nursery rhyme, which has adapted itself over the years. I don't think it's one that most people of my generation have ever heard before, or maybe only heard in the context of this film or this novel. But was kind of an interesting deep dive into the history of this book, finding out how popular it apparently was. Also noticing that the original publication of it in the US was called And Then There Were None, because even though it was 1940, it was still frowned upon to use the original title, because even at that time, somehow that word didn't pass muster in publishing circles. Go figure. I don't understand either. So anyway, without trying to digress too much, the whole reason for the name is relegated to a relatively minor but sort of minor curiosity within the story itself, and contextually still works fine in this movie, where they are using the Indians version, and though it has its imperialist undertones. I mean, Agatha Christie was never particularly well known for being racially or socially sensitive, even for her time. But the mechanical reason for including the 10 Little Indians rhyme and the story as it surrounds that still mechanically works perfectly sensibly. This film itself, though, it has its ups and downs. And I think the most notable thing in reading up on this after the fact is, for those familiar with either the movie or the book, or possibly both, they differ not dramatically, but the ending and the adaptation to screen has been changed very severely in its conclusion, in order to show a more, I don't know, compelling, a more interesting narrative that appeals more to a cinema-going audience, is going to be my guess. In my brief readings, I was not able to find a specific account of why the ending was changed, and I don't see any particular reason to do so. In fact, I think it dramatically weakens the story to change it the way they have. But it makes sense from a cinematic standpoint of a movie-going audience, especially in the 40s, looking for a little bit more of an upbeat ending, or one that's a little bit more satisfying. Whereas Agatha Christie's writings often don't have a particularly pleasant ending. In this case, I think it's okay in theory, and it's not great, but it's okay in theory. And in actual execution, I could take it or leave it. The movie overall, however, sort of struggles. And while I haven't seen any other adaptations of the film, and I haven't read the novel, I am sure that they could have adapted this in a much more compelling way. This is a movie that is lapsed into the copyright is lapsed, so it's in the public domain now. Actually, the downside of that, of course, means that nobody is really a caretaker for the original film, and so the prints that are out there vary in quality. The original version I started watching actually was in color, which the film is not originally in color. It is black and white. But as was the case for many films, all the way up through the 80s, black and white films were being adapted after, or were being colorized for retransmission after the fact. There's actually some fascinating stuff regarding, I think it was It's a Wonderful Life, which we touched on a few videos back, where there's some weird copyright stuff. This is the stuff that only fascinates me. I'm sorry, I'm going to digress for a moment here. There was some interesting copyright stuff regarding what happens when a colorization happens. So there's some legal cases about, is this movie having the original black and white film colorized by somebody else, is this considered to be a newly copyrightable work, either by the original IP owner or by somebody else as an adaptation of sorts. And in a couple of different rulings, it was ruled that they are changed enough to actually be newly copyrightable, or copyrightable in a separate, have a separate copyright from the original material. I find that fascinating, but that's neither here nor there. The point I was trying to get at is that the quality of this film actually is, it's a mixed bag. It is black and white, and this is not super early for cinema. The 1945, they've got plenty of practice. There's plenty of incredibly talented people, and shooting in black and white, it doesn't do a great job with the material it has to work with. Story-wise, there are plenty of contexts in which it makes sense to use very dramatic use of light and darkness, and they kind of don't. In addition to not having a huge amount of pleasant and impressive like cinematic artistry, the movie's just sort of fine visually. There's a few camera shots and camera moves that are kind of nice, but as far as the actual visual quality of the scenes, especially since it seems to have been shot both on sets and indoors and outdoors in a real world setting, the lighting varies somewhat dramatically and in ways that doesn't look particularly pleasant sometimes. And the actual quality of the film, whether it was the original shooting film or just negligence in its in archiving the film and the subsequent digital scans that have come from it, just don't look particularly nice. They don't look nearly as bad as the colorized version, which, like, within 10 seconds I was like, I don't think I really want to watch this. This looks terrible. Not that I don't really like colorized films post-colorized films in the first place, but that it looked very bad. But you can probably find it online to watch if you want to check out both of them. So anyway, digressing a little bit about the quality of the print and the film itself. As far as the actual production goes, again, it's got some ups and downs. There's some very talented acting going on here. A number of names who are not like huge names, but notable enough character actors for their time and place, and put on pretty good performances. But the actual adaptation of the script leaves something to be desired in a variety of different ways. With there being no real this is not a Poirot, so it doesn't have like a lead investigator or somebody who you can sort of pivot back to for guidance or understanding, and it's this amalgamation of different viewpoints, of all these different characters coming together and trying to solve a mystery. There's no reason that can't be compelling, but the way that it is presented is sort of questionable. It doesn't really lead me to believe that, even for the performances that are put on, that the characters are super invested in solving the mystery themselves. Which, while I haven't read the original novel, I'm presuming is more of a factor, as it is in many of the Poirot films, that the characters are more driven to find resolution to the mystery. And especially in this one, where their own lives are potentially at stake, I just don't get the sense necessarily that they are even particularly engaged with the goings-on in the location. They are sort of distracted, and their actual depth of character is not particularly impressive either. The whole story sort of hinges on the idea of all characters being guilty of one thing or another, all of them being sort of odd and outside the realms of normal behavior, and whether it's because of their job or their choices or their social situation or something like that. These should all be really interesting and unique and compelling characters, but the movie really fails to capitalize on that. And while the way they conduct themselves makes me believe that they are those different characters, they don't really exercise their differences in knowledge and their differences in experience to create character dynamics. The actual dynamics between different characters are very limited, very thin on the ground, and in a story that should be all about investigation and accusation and false clues and trying to keep your emotions in check while you try and sort out what's actually going on. It doesn't make me believe that all the time. And I'm going to assign that most of the blame in that respect to the script itself. It's not a particularly short film, but it's not a particularly long film. It's 97 minutes. And I just couldn't help feeling that, for the aforementioned reasons and a couple of others, it just doesn't make particularly good use of its screen time. It doesn't seem to necessarily be leading to any particular place, and the beats in the story, the moments of new revelations, the moments of violence, the shocks, the deaths, these are all sort of, they don't have the weight you would really expect or want from a really quality mystery story. And the ultimate conclusion, the reveal, is not super well supported. I've talked before about how when you present a mystery story, you don't want the media that you're reading or watching to get too far ahead of the viewer, because then they'll just be lost and confused and waiting for the resolution. And you don't want it to fall too far behind, because you don't want them to be like, okay, I already know who the killer is. Let's get to the end, or something like that. And I feel like this kind of fails to do both. And it just it doesn't it doesn't really tell you who to believe or why. It doesn't give you compelling it doesn't give you compelling arguments from any of the characters. It doesn't give you compelling evidence to suggest that anyone should be pointed at, or there's no like sense of wanting to be like, oh, I totally know who it is, and then like arguing with somebody else who you're watching with, like, no, it's totally this person, no, it's totally that person. Or like speculation. It doesn't lead itself to any of the sort of, for want of a better phrase, intellectual pursuits that a mystery really should be provoking in people. And again, I don't think that's down to Agatha Christie's book. Maybe one day I'll read it, or I'll watch other adaptations. But it just I don't believe that is the source of that problem. This is a story that is generally heralded, in addition to being one of the best selling of all time, generally heralded as being of truly impressive quality, because it manages to balance the like not making it too obvious who are the people who are under suspicion or at fault, or the perpetrators, but also not like just obfuscating it or giving an unsatisfying ending. And so to loop back around to talk about the ending again, I have no way of talking about it. Never mind. The ending is just, I think it's a mistake. The original story is more dour, and is more of a, it gives more of a weight towards the consideration of like the social contracts that people form, and the ways in which people get themselves in trouble or get others in trouble, and with the law or otherwise. And it's really sort of a commentary, or even a condemnation of various social behaviors. Whereas this film doesn't really kind of get there. At best, the characters are sort of tropified, or as much as tropified as they can be for the era. And the ending is really the nail in the coffin that just sort of throws the baby out with the bathwater. Doesn't seem to recognize why the ending was the way it was, and completely undercuts the tone and the meaning of the commentary and the meaning of the story as a result. The pacing overall just could be tighter. The writing could be more compelling. The characters could be better written and better extrapolated upon to make them more interesting on their own. And the rest of the production quality is just sort of okay. On the whole, it's not a bad film, but it's definitely not particularly high up there in terms of mystery films or Agatha Christie adaptations. I am curious now, because I've now found out that there's like dozens of other adaptations of this novel to film, TV, and then Agatha Christie's original theater adaptation. And so I'm going to look into maybe watching other adaptations of it. I may or may not do them on the show. I may or may not even find them interesting enough to warrant doing. But I did look up enough to find out that some of those other film adaptations also change the ending in the same way. And I'm kind of curious whether any of the other ones are better executed such that the ending doesn't feel like quite such a slap in the face. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I hope this one's interesting. Let me know if you've seen it or read it or seen another version. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.